my name is Nathan Cole. I'm 28 years old, a former Marine, and until 5 months ago, I believed I'd given everything for my country. I left a piece of myself in a valley in Helmand Province, my leg, my calm, and something even harder to get back, trust. Serving felt like purpose. Out there, I knew my place, my role, my worth. But the day I came home, everything started to unravel in slow, steady lines, like a tear in old fabric. It began in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and rust. I'd been back stateside for 6 weeks, recovering from surgery and learning how to balance on a prosthetic leg. The doctors called me a miracle. My father called me a burden. He stood at the foot of my bed, hands in the pockets of his flannel jacket, face carved in stone. Mom didn't come, said she couldn't handle seeing me like that. He waited until the nurse left the room, then pulled up a plastic chair like he had news to deliver. "You're not the same man we sent off to war." Those were the first words. Cold, quiet, like he was stating a fact. Then he pulled out a piece of paper, hospital bills, I think, and laid it flat across my lap. "They want more than our insurance will cover. The VA's dragging its feet, the rehab, the meds, the checkups. It's more than we can afford." His voice never cracked. Just smooth, steady numbers like he was reading out a grocery list. I looked at him, waiting for the joke, the punchline. It never came. Just silence and the steady beep of my heart monitor. I asked him what he meant, still dazed from the meds. He said they couldn't keep supporting me, that keeping me alive had already cost the family too much. That maybe if I still had my career ahead of me, if I could walk normally or hold a job, it might be different. Then he stood up, told me he loved me, and walked out. That was it. No hug, no goodbye, just the squeak of his boots on the hospital tile and the door swinging shut behind him. 3 days later, I was discharged. No family waiting, no ride. A nurse wheeled me out to the curb and handed me a duffel bag packed with my clothes and meds. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but all she managed was take care now before the automatic doors closed behind her. I sat on that sidewalk for almost an hour, the autumn wind cutting through my hoodie, staring at the parking lot like someone might still show up. No one did. Eventually, I stood, adjusted my crutches, and limped toward the bus stop. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. Home was just a place that had erased me. When I reached my parents' house, the locks had been changed. I stood on the front porch, staring at the wreath my mother used to hang every fall. No lights were on. I knocked once. No answer. Just silence and the sound of leaves scraping across the driveway. I left without saying a word. Took one last look at the house I used to believe I'd come home to. The house I'd fought for in some distant desert. The house that now wanted nothing to do with me. I walked until my leg ached and the sweat froze on my back. Found a bench outside a gas station and sat with my duffel pressed against my chest like a shield. That's where I spent my first night as a man left behind. They say you never come back the same from war, but they don't tell you that home might change. 2. That sometimes the real battle starts after the war ends. We were 3 clicks out from the village when the call came in. A local interpreter and 2 Marines had gone dark during a patrol, last seen near a dried-out riverbed. Orders came fast: get in, get them out. The sky was a yellow haze, the kind that makes your eyes sting and your throat burn. We moved fast, hugging the shadows between mud brick walls. Every sound was a question mark, a radio crackle, a metal clink. Then the world lit up. An IED took out our point man. The rest of us hit the dirt as bullets tore through the air. It felt like the entire valley exploded. Smoke, screams, the thud of boots, and the shriek of steel. I remember crawling forward, adrenaline drowning the fear. That's when I saw Rodriguez. He was down, bleeding bad, stuck in the open. I didn't think. I just moved. Reached him, threw him over my shoulder, and ran like hell. Something exploded behind us. The heat hit first, then the pain. My left leg disappeared. I hit the ground hard, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. All I saw was sky, then hands, blurry faces, and a whirring that grew louder until the medevac came down like an angel made of metal. I passed out with the taste of blood in my mouth and the rotors shaking my bones. Back in the States, they called me a hero, pinned medals to my chest and smiled for pictures I couldn't stand looking at. But every ceremony felt like a bad dream. I wasn't proud. I wasn't whole. I had traded my leg for silence, and nobody could hear what was screaming inside. They clapped and thanked me, called me brave. But I didn't feel brave. I felt broken. Like a part of me had never made it out of that valley, and the rest of me was pretending to be someone worth saving. The first night back, they threw a barbecue in the backyard. Neighbors brought potato salad and cheap beer, and my dad planted a small American flag in the flower bed like it meant something. I smiled through the speeches, shook hands with people I barely remembered, and laughed when someone called me a real-life action figure. But the firecrackers someone lit for fun made me drop a plate of ribs and nearly tackle the folding table. Everyone laughed it off, but my hands kept shaking long after the smoke cleared. That night, I didn't sleep, just laid in bed listening for sounds that didn't belong in suburbia. My mom started tiptoeing around me after that. She folded my dress blues and slid them into the back of the closet without a word. My dad used to clap me on the back like he was proud, but now he flinched every time I raised my voice, even if it was just at the TV. One morning, I found a brochure for a VA therapy group stuffed between the mail. No note, just there, like a silent suggestion. I didn't bring it up, and neither did they. We stopped talking about Afghanistan altogether. If someone asked, they'd say I was doing great, but nobody looked me in the eye when they said it. At dinner, the silences got longer. I'd forget to answer questions, caught in my own head. My little cousin asked if I had any cool war stories. I told him no. The couch became my new bunker. I'd sleep sitting up, one eye open, just in case. Mom stopped asking me to join family outings. Dad worked later than usual. The welcome home signs were gone within a week. I realized then that I didn't come home. I just changed zip codes. The real me, the part that walked into the war hole, never made it back. And the house I grew up in felt more like a guest room than a place I belonged. It started after the second night I punched a hole in the wall during a nightmare. I didn't even remember doing it. Just woke up with blood on my knuckles and plaster dust on my chest. Mom cried in the kitchen while trying to cover the hole with a framed photo from my high school graduation. My dad didn't say much that morning, just kept sipping his coffee and tapping his wedding ring against the mug like a timer counting down. The next day, he asked me to sit down. The living room felt too bright, too clean, like it didn't belong to people with problems. My sister was there, arms crossed, jaw clenched like she'd already made up her mind. Dad said the words carefully, like he was trying to keep a lid on something boiling. He said the war broke me, that I needed more help than they could give. He mentioned a place out of town, a long-term facility with specialists. Mom didn't argue, just pressed a tissue to her mouth and nodded like her silence meant love. My sister stared at the carpet and wouldn't look up once. I waited for someone to speak for me, to say this wasn't fair, that I was trying. But nobody did. They spoke around me like I wasn't in the room, like I was already gone. Dad pulled out a pamphlet and slid it across the coffee table like a peace offering. I didn't even read it. I stood up, grabbed my bag from the hall closet, and started packing. No one stopped me, not even Mom, who used to cry when I left for deployments. I zipped the duffel slowly, hoping someone might ask me to stay, hoping this was just a bad dream or a cruel joke. But the house stayed quiet, filled with the sound of my own footsteps. At the door, I turned around. Dad was standing behind me. He didn't raise his voice, just said I wasn't their Nathan anymore. Then he closed the door. The click echoed like gunfire. I stood there with my bag, staring at the wood grain like it could give me answers. There was nothing left to say. I limped down the driveway without looking back. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just walked. Because when the people you love decide you're too broken to fix, there's nothing left but silence and pavement. My old truck became my bedroom, my closet, and my shelter. I parked behind a grocery store that didn't ask questions, tucked into the shadows between the loading dock and a chain-link fence. I kept the windows cracked to let the stale air out and the cold in. Most nights, I stared at the ceiling, counting the stains in the headliner, listening to the hum of distant traffic like waves on a broken beach. My prosthetic sat on the passenger seat like a silent passenger. I hated it. I hated what it reminded me of. I found a job doing night security at a strip mall. Minimum wage, no benefits, but it was quiet and nobody asked about my past. I wore the uniform like armor, walked the lot with a limp and a flashlight, and pretended I still mattered. The loneliness clung to me. It sat in my chest and made my thoughts heavy. I stopped calling old friends. They had lives I couldn't understand anymore. One night, I met Sam. He was the janitor for the office building next door. Gray beard, slow steps, kind eyes. He always had a thermos of coffee that smelled better than anything I'd tasted in months. At first, we just nodded at each other. Two ghosts working the same shift. Then, one night, he offered me a cup of coffee. I hesitated, then took it. It became a ritual. He'd sit on the curb during his break, and I'd lean against the wall. We didn't talk much, just sat in silence, watching the stars when the city lights gave us room. When we did speak, it was simple things. Weather, football. Once, I mentioned Afghanistan. He didn't say much, just nodded. That was enough. He never asked why I lived in my truck or why I stared off into space when things got too quiet. He just showed up every night with coffee and a calm presence that made me feel a little more human. For the first time in a long time, someone looked at me without pity or fear. Just a man sharing a quiet night with another man who'd seen too much. I was living in a room that barely fit a bed and a folding chair. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and the radiator clanked like it was haunted. Every dollar I earned went to rent, gas, and instant noodles. One Tuesday evening, I was heating up canned soup when someone knocked. I wasn't expecting anyone. People didn't visit me. At the door stood a man in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase and a card with my name printed on it. He said he was an attorney. He asked if he could come in. I stepped aside, heart already racing. He sat on the edge of my chair like he didn't want to touch anything. Then he told me Sam had passed away. My chest went tight. I hadn't seen him in weeks, but figured he was just off sick. Then the lawyer said Sam left everything to me. I laughed at first, thinking he meant a box of old tools or a dusty savings bond. But then he said the number, 50 million. The words didn't register. My brain tried to connect them to reality and failed. I just stared at him like he was speaking another language. The lawyer pulled out documents with Sam's signature. Then he told me the truth. Sam wasn't just a janitor. He was a retired engineer, a veteran. He'd spent decades designing medical devices for combat medics and field hospitals. His inventions had saved thousands of lives, including mine, probably, and he never said a word. He lived simply, by choice. He watched people. He listened. And somehow, he decided that I was worth everything he had. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to breathe. The man who mopped floors and poured coffee had seen value in me when my own family saw none. He gave me more than money. He gave me back my worth. The letter was written in shaky script, the kind that made you slow down to read each word like it mattered. Nathan, you don't know this, but the first night I saw you sleeping in that truck, I saw myself. I was 22 when I came back from Vietnam and found my parents had sold my room to pay off debts. They said the war changed me. Maybe it did. I stopped talking much, took a job pushing a mop, and never looked back. I didn't need pity. I just needed one person to treat me like I was still human. You did that. You offered me your half sandwich one night without even knowing my name. You asked how I was doing like you meant it. You never looked through me. Most people do. I never married, never had kids. But I had my work. The devices I built, the patents I filed, all of it funded quietly from the corner of a hospital few ever noticed. Watching you fight every day reminded me why I started building them in the first place. You were kind when the world was cruel. You were patient when no one was with you. You didn't stop being good even when life gave you every reason to. That's not broken, Nathan. That's brave. I leave everything to you because you reminded me that quiet courage still exists. You reminded me of who I used to be. Use it well. Not for me. For the next kid who sleeps in a truck, wondering if anyone sees him. You saw me. And I see you. Sam. On a bright spring morning, Nathan stood outside the newly painted brick building with Sam's name etched in bronze above the door. A fresh American flag fluttered in the breeze, casting its shadow across a row of folding chairs set up for the opening ceremony. He wore his old Marine dress blues, the only formal thing he owned that still fit, and tried not to let his voice shake as he cut the ribbon. Inside, the first guests trickled through. A man with sunburned cheeks and a cardboard sign tucked under one arm. A woman with a limp and a soft smile who hadn't slept indoors in weeks. They each paused at the threshold, as if not quite believing this warmth was for them. Coffee was brewing. Showers were running. Bunk beds were made up with clean sheets. Staff moved gently, like they knew the weight these visitors carried. A framed photo of Sam sat in the lobby next to a vase of daisies. Nathan caught himself smiling at it. That night, as the lights dimmed and the halls grew quiet, Nathan stepped outside and looked up at the stars. Sam would have liked this place. It wasn't just shelter, it was home, a second chance, a promise kept. The phone rang while Nathan was folding towels in the laundry room at Havensworth. The number was familiar. He let it buzz twice before answering. His father's voice came through, softer than he remembered, careful in a way that made the silence feel louder. They said they saw him on the news, that they hadn't known what to say, but now they wanted to make things right. His mother was on the line too, quiet in the background like a ghost trying to breathe. His father said they made a mistake, that they were scared and they didn't know how to help. Nathan listened, still folding, still calm. Then he said, "When I was broken, where were you?" Not angry, just tired. There was a pause long enough to stretch a whole year into a second. Then Nathan told them he was doing okay now, that he hoped they would be too. He wished them peace. Then he hung up. No yelling, no bitterness. Just a door gently closing behind a man who had already walked through fire. He stood there for a minute, watching the phone go dark. Then he put the last towel on the shelf and went back to work. The grass was soft beneath Nathan's boots as he walked the narrow path between the graves. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the names carved in stone. He carried nothing but a folded flag and a set of old dog tags clutched in his hand. When he reached Sam's marker, he knelt slowly, knees stiff from years of wear. The stone was simple, just like the man. No rank, no mention of fortune. Just a name and 2 dates, with a small phrase beneath. A quiet life, well lived. Nathan placed the dog tags at the base of the headstone, resting them gently like an offering. He sat back on his heels and let the silence settle around him. Then he whispered a thank you, barely louder than the wind. "You gave me more than money. You gave me the kind of love I never got from blood. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You reminded me that we choose who we carry forward." As the breeze moved through the trees and the sky began to turn, Nathan stood and looked back one last time. Not with sadness, but with something closer to peace. Who in your life saw your worth when others didn't?